What's up, people? Chef back again, coming at you with the promised video of the problem with season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. So, I for one think that season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead was actually really good. If I was going to make a list of all the seasons from like best to worst, from Fear and The Walking Dead, it would honestly probably be my fourth favorite season out of all 11 seasons. And I'd put it at number 4. I think it's one of the better seasons. I liked the twist that we end up sort of on the villain's side in this season. I feel like, unlike with season 2, I felt all of the side characters for the most part were pretty memorable. I thought, the dichotomy between Troy and Nick made Nick a lot more likable. I cared about him way more than I did this season, and I found Troy to be a very chilling and interesting antagonist. I thought he was handled really well as like a sociopath. I cared a bit more about Madison and Alicia, not as much as is necessary, but I cared about them more than I did in season 2. They're still not where they need to be. I still don't really care about them that much. Strand took a nosedive a bit for me in this one. Not as hard as, say, Daniel did last season. But I had some gripes with Strand. Nothing too bad to distract me from the season, though. And Daniel comes back in full swing. Oh my God, was Daniel amazing this season. He was fantastic. That actor deserves a round of applause. He really does. He is fantastic. He is the best written character on this show and the best acted character on this show by far and bar none. No competition. He's just better than everyone. His story is more interesting and more intriguing. His background and his past is more interesting than anybody else's. He's acted really well, and whereas when some people do something crazy, even in The Walking Dead, when they do something like crazy and like comic booky maybe, and like just completely disarm a bunch of people, and it's like kind of eye rolling, you don't believe it. But when Daniel does it, if Daniel disarms like 4 armed men or something, I believe it, because these guys don't have training. They just have like guns thrown in their hands, Whereas like Daniel has this background as this cold stone killer. And you can believe that someone with his training and his tactics and everything would be able to do what he does. That moment when he interviews Nick, when it seems like he's gonna, like when he's like interrogating him and it seems like he might go like darker, fantastic. His reunion with his daughter, like his reaction to it all, it's just done so well. Just everything with Daniel in this season was done really well. The stuff with the Aqua guy, I forget his name. Is it Emmanuel? I honestly don't remember. He was pretty interesting. He was funny. Just he was great. And Jeremiah as like an antagonist who's on our protagonist's side originally, and them being on the wrong side of this whole thing, and the fact that the Proctors aren't really much better. Like, they have their reasons for hating them, and they're doing things because of the stuff Jeremiah and his kind did to them, but at the same time they poisoned a bunch of innocent people as well and killed a ton of people that they did not need to kill. and they made really good antagonists, and I really liked how interesting their leader was. I thought he was pretty well acted. I thought that he was pretty interesting. I felt he was kind of funny, like because he's just like so like serious. So like when you put him alongside characters that maybe aren't necessarily like that, it really works. I liked Jake. I thought Jake was a very likable guy. I think his name was Jake, Troy's brother. Um, this was a fantastic season. It's not without its issues, without its problems. Every season, every show is going to have its issues, is going to have its problems, obviously. So, what's the problem then? If the story is intriguing and has these good sort of twists and turns, even if I did see them sort of coming, and even if it was kind of eye rolling that they were going to be on a farm again, like a ranch type of place, they at least did something a little interesting with it. They at least didn't reuse the same, uh, like, I don't believe the dead are dead, like, we shouldn't kill them, like, bullshit from, like, Herschel and not Herschel. Um, and it's an interesting concept the first time, but like after a while, it's just like drawn out. Like the reason why it kind of worked in the comics was because like Herschel hadn't really dealt with the dead, and all of the people that were in his barn were like his family and his neighbors who turned. He was kind of holding out hope, and they were really only on the farm for like a couple of issues in the comic. Like you can literally like read through the entire comic and the entire portion of the comic in which are on Herschel's farm. I'm pretty sure you can do that in under 5 minutes. That is the amount of time that they spent there. It's almost non-existent, which is why it kind of worked, because you can't really linger on it. Um, or else it's just going to get tedious because there's not too much depth to that scenario. There's just enough depth there to give a little bit, of time to. Um, so I'm glad they didn't do that. Like I said, the characters are solid. For the most part, there were a couple of people I didn't really care about, but I cared about most of these characters. I remember when Luciana left, I was really disappointed, as opposed to like in season 2 when Strand was on that boat. I was like, oh yeah, when he was on the raft, I was like, finally, we've gotten rid of this asshole. When Chris ran off, I was like, oh yeah, woo, no more Chris, no more Chris. I even felt bad about Travis dying. I haven't hated Travis, but I never really liked him, and his portion of the show has, in my opinion, been the worst because it's the one that relied the most on Chris, and Chris is the worst character in the history of The Walking Dead by far and bar none. No one comes close or compares to how unbelievably awful Chris was in terms of writing, in terms of acting, and just in terms of the person that he was. Like, he wasn't a good villain. He wasn't a good antagonist. He was a bad one. Like, simple as that. Joffrey Baratheon. I find Joffrey Baratheon to be far more endearing and likable than Chris. That is how much I hate Chris. I like Joffrey Baratheon more. Like, if Joffrey Baratheon and Chris were going to be in a death match, and they're fighting to the death. Like, I'm going, Joffrey, 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 Joffrey. Like, fuck him up. Like, I hate Chris. I hate Chris. Because at least Joffrey's interesting. Joffrey's a good villain. Like, he manages to be an obnoxious little shit while also being a good villain. That you want to see die. It's not that I wanted Chris to see Chris die. It's that I wanted to see Chris be deleted from the show entirely. I wanted them to go back in time, George Lucas style, and edit their previous seasons and just edit Chris out of them because he's that bad. Like, this is supposed to be about season 3. We're past that. We're past the Dark Ages, boys. We're past that. No more Chris. Best thing that ever happened to this show. Like, no Chris. Um, it's phenomenal how the second you take Chris out of the show immediately shot up tenfold in quality. Because the end of season 2, I maintain, the end of season 2 is at a level with season 3. It is just as good. The last couple episodes, after Chris is already gone, and after they leave the hotel, that stuff is all solid, Um, so, what's the problem? Honestly, season 1 and 2 were so horrendous. Like, season 1 was so horrendous, so horrendously awful. And season 2 was so lackluster and bland and boring and unmemorable throughout until the last couple episodes that and focused largely on the most unlikable, most hateable character I've ever seen in any show ever. Um, that no one came back. Like, that's why people didn't show up for season 3. That's why they had such bad ratings despite having such a stellar season, is because they fucked it up before it even took off the ground. Because season 1 was so bad and season 2 so unmemorable that no one could possibly have given a shit going into season 3. Most people stopped like before season 1 was even over, and if they didn't, they sure as fuck stopped in season 2. No one, by the end of season 2, Nick isn't with the group, and Strand is left behind, and Daniel is presumed dead. So the only 3 good characters in the show are MIA. So why would anyone keep watching? You know, it's sad, that half the people walked out of Sunday Survival once uh, Fear the Walking Dead started. Because Fear the Walking Dead season 4 episode 1 is the best episode of the show, by far and bar none. And I don't think it's by coincidence that the main cast has basically nothing to do with that entire episode and we didn't see them. Because they're not really all that likable or memorable or well written or well acted. They're not really good enough to hold up a show on their own, with the exception of Daniel. And it's a wonder how I've spent 2 whole seasons, hours upon hours with Madison and Nick and Alicia, Strand, all of these characters, and I spent like 40 minutes with Althea and John, and I care more about them than I ever did any of the characters in Fear, including Daniel. You know, I still love Daniel. I still think he's like the best character on the show. He's definitely the most interesting, but I just find Althea and John to be really interesting and really likable and really funny, and they're pretty cool characters, and I can't wait to see where they go. But unfortunately, everyone else has already stopped caring, and everyone else is already tuned out of the show because they fucked up the first 2 seasons so badly that no one else was willing to give it a shot afterwards. And it's a shame that they managed to create something so stellar and so great as season 3 and the first episode of season 4 for it to not be seen by anyone. And that'll be all. Peace.